So my last video was about 4.5 months ago, and in it I was optimistic about being able to make more videos during the semester. That did not happen. Quickly I figured out that with the new course preps and prepping new labs especially, and also doing committee work and stuff, that I just had no time at all to be doing good things like reading books and reflecting on literature. And that's not really much of hyperbole either, because I had to work often like 14, 15-hour days and 70, 80-hour work weeks, and also keep the house and the animals alive, and that just left no time, no margin for me to do other things. And that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit today, having margin in your life, because that's a concept that Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, taught me about when I was young, and the older I get, the more I realize how important it is. So if you don't know, Henry David Thoreau was a friend of Ralph Waldo Emerson's, and he went into the woods for 2 years and built a cabin there to live in. And he built a cabin out of used lumber from a railroad worker's shed. He actually bought the house off of the railroad worker, straightened out the boards as best as he could, and then built a cabin in the woods and lived there. He worked a little bit to make ends meet and to get food on the table at least, but he also spent a lot of time in meditation about literature and life and reading and writing, and it was just a very fruitful time for him. And Walden is the book that came from that time, and I want to share some quotes from it. So first, to get to the quote about having margin in our lives. He says that there were times when I could not afford to sacrifice the bloom of the present moment to any work, whether of the head or hands. I love a broad margin to my life. And of course he's talking about margin, I feel, in a book, when you have that space on the edge of the book that is your margin. And if you have a book with narrow margins, you have no room there to write extra things and dwell on the stuff that you're reading. You can't express your thoughts there. And so you only have the book's meat to go off of. You can't add to it in any way. But if you have a broad margin, there's plenty of room to flesh out the ideas and explore them and make your own personal notes and contributions to the book. I had professors in undergrad who studied medieval manuscripts and looked at the thoughts of people in the margins to learn about them. Because the people were adding value to the book by writing their own thoughts there in the margins. And our lives are the same. If our life has no extra space there for us to do other things and be creative, then that's just cheapening our lives, essentially. But so he talks about wanting and loving a broad margin to his life, and then he goes on to say that some days he would just sit there in the sun and the nature for half a day and bask in it. And that might sound unproductive, but he says that I grew in those seasons like corn in the night, and they were far better than any work of the hands would have been. In other places in the book, he talks about how he only had to work a few weeks out of the year to make enough money for food to subsist the rest of the year. Because he grew a lot of his own food while he was out there as well. But he had the rest of the time as margin, the rest of the time there to just do whatever he felt like he needed to do and have a more fruitful and fulfilling life, therefore. So of course that's our goal. We would all love to have time to just sit there for half a day in nature. I can't remember the last time I had that. But how do we get there? So in my case, right now, what I've decided I need to do is downsize and move closer to work. Because on top of the 14-hour work days, I was driving every day an hour and 30 minutes essentially to get to and from work. And that just adds up really quickly. So I'm going to move closer to work and shrink my house, and especially shrink the number of things that I have in my house. And so that's what I'm sitting in right now. I'm sitting in a 15-foot dumpster that's chock full of stuff from the garage that I've collected or that came with the house when I bought it, and it just sat there weighing on me throughout my whole 8 years of living here or whatever. And so downsizing with the dumpster, I've had a lot of other ways that I'm cleaning and scrapping stuff as well. But that's something that Thoreau talks about as the main way to get this margin, because he says that the cost of a thing is how much of your life it takes as you own it, essentially. He says, the cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run. So maybe someone gave me this tool or something that I may or may not ever use, and so it was free. It didn't cost me anything, right? But if my garage is so cluttered with free things that didn't cost anything, that I can't move around in there very easily, then that's costing me. Because every time I want to use, say, my saw, I was having to rearrange some stuff to make the saw even accessible. And that's costing me life and energy. And then also every time I walk in the garage, just the sheer volume of stuff there, of clutter, was weighing on me. And that's not just the garage, it's in my house as well. But that's the long run cost of all the things that I had accumulated over the years. And they might be valuable things, but they still are problematic in the long run. The example that he gives in Walden is of kind of limestone decorations that he had on his desk, because he was a bit of a naturalist. He assumed he found these limestone rocks outside and wanted to examine them, and then he had them on his desk as decoration. But he quickly found that was not sustainable. He says, "I had 3 pieces of limestone on my desk, but I was terrified to find that they required to be dusted daily, when the furniture of my mind was all undusted still. And I threw them out the window in disgust." So he had them, and it required energy to maintain them. And if he didn't maintain them, if he didn't dust them, then it would weigh on him that he hasn't done that chore yet. So either he wastes his life maintaining them, or he wastes his mental energy, essentially, knowing that he hasn't maintained them. And that's just rocks on a table. And I have so many things like that I could point out that I found around my house that just required dusting at the very minimum, but also just were in the way often as well. So getting rid of all these things is one way to get that margin. And in fact, later on in the book, he says that a man is rich in proportion to the number of things that he can afford to let alone. So because all these things kind of cost us our life, passively or actively, the fewer things that we have, the more things we can let alone, be without, the richer we are. And he gives a humorous example of this when he's talking about his neighbors moving. He says that he can't really tell the rich people from the poor people when they're hauling their wagons full of stuff past him, and he's looking at the stuff in there. He says, "I can never tell from inspecting such a load whether it belonged to a so-called rich man or a poor one. The owner always seemed poverty-stricken. Indeed, the more you have of such things, the poorer you are. Each load looks as if it contained the contents of a dozen shanties. And if one shanty is poor, this is a dozen times as poor." And because these things drain so much of our life without us really noticing it, we scramble to acquire more of them. I've put this quote on the screen before in one of my other videos, but I didn't read it, so I'm going to go ahead and read it now. And he's talking about the estate sale of a deacon, and they're getting rid of all the stuff that he acquired over the years. He says, "As usual, a great proportion was trumpery, which had begun to accumulate in his father's day. Among the rest was a dried tapeworm." I haven't found any dried tapeworms around my house yet, but I found plenty things as weird. "And now, after lying half a century in his garret or other dust holes, these things were not burned. Instead of a bonfire or purifying destruction of them, there was an auction or increasing of them. The neighbors eagerly collected to view them, bought them all, and carefully transported them to their garrets and dust holes, to lie there till their estates are settled." And this is exactly what has been happening in my life right now as I'm purging stuff. I've had several purifying bonfires, probably 5 of them that are 20 feet across. I have this 15-foot dumpster that I'm sitting in right now that's full of stuff that I didn't feel like could or should be burned. But more importantly, I've been recycling and donating a lot of stuff as well, and taking apart broken machines that I had collected over the years and removing their metals so that they could be scrapped appropriately and responsibly. But also I've been giving stuff to my neighbors, and they were just as eager as these neighbors to collect the junk that I've accrued, and sending off trailers full of lumber that I acquired and whatnot, and kind of started a feeding frenzy when some saw what others were getting. They all swarmed in and wanted to get some of the free stuff to take home to their garrets and tuck it away. But the end goal of all of this is to have more free time in life, more of that margin to do good things. And the way Thoreau puts it at the beginning of the book is by saying that when someone has obtained those things which are necessary to life, there is another alternative than to obtain the superfluities, and that is to adventure on life now, his vacation from humbler toil having commenced. So instead of just collecting all this junk and other superfluous things, some of which we might value but are still superfluous, we can adventure on life now. And the adventure that I want to go on, and that I will keep downsizing until I can go on, is to continue these videos with you. I want to be able to have time to read and have time to share what I've read with you guys, so that I can get it out there in the world. Because my channel's called Another's Bread, I want to take the bread that I found at another's bakery, if you will, and share it with you. Because I've gotten so much value from it, and I want to pass it on. And the stuff that I'm throwing away, the stuff that I'm scrapping, the stuff that I'm giving away and donating, that has not provided value to my life like books have. And those things are keeping me from reading my books, and that's not cool. So anyway, I hope to see you soon in my new house with a bit more peace and a bit more margin. See you there. I should add that George MacDonald actually had a book of poems in which every other page was intentionally left blank. This acted as a sort of giant margin and encouraged readers to both reflect on and respond to the poems that they've been reading. It's called The Diary of an Old Soul, if you want to check it out for yourself, and I'll put the dedication up here. See you next time.